This presentation is designed to support NHS commissioning staff involved in invoice validation for patient care. It is also of interest to information governance managers and to providers of healthcare and services to the NHS. It also contains specific training materials relevant to the role of invoice processing within ISFE, the integrated single finance environment of the NHS, for the responsibilities shown. The reject process in ISFE aims to protect patients and service users and to keep the NHS compliant with Data Protection Act requirements. When providers put personal confidential data on the face of invoices or in backing schedules sent to CCGs for payment, even where there is patient consent, its transmission through the NHS finance system is not a permitted use, as it cannot be controlled closely enough to prevent PCD from being available to individuals who have no legal basis for seeing it. PCD, personal confidential data, is a term used to describe personal information about identified or identifiable individuals which should be kept private or secret. For our purposes, personal includes the Data Protection Act definition of personal data, but includes dead as well as living people, and confidential includes both information given in confidence and that which is owed a duty of confidence, and includes sensitive as defined in the Data Protection Act. The kinds of PCD that are typically at risk of being included in provider invoices are shown here. This is not an exhaustive list. If in doubt, check with your information governance team or lead. Even if the provider has patient consent to use PCD for invoice validation, this should not be sent on or with the invoices, as it is not possible to control the access to that data sufficiently within the NHS finance system so that only those with a need to know can access it, and a patient or service user would not normally give such broad and far-reaching permission. Remember, it is still necessary for the patient to have given consent for personal data to be used for invoice validation, but it still needs to be protected. This list covers most of the usual kinds of accidental disclosure of PCD on invoices, but it is not exhaustive. The next few slides are based on a real example of extensive PCD being disclosed on an invoice and supporting schedules. In this case, the invoice itself quotes the patient name, which is not a permitted use of PCD as it can be linked to his home address and the fact that he is receiving domiciliary care. This invoice should be rejected. The names on this invoice have all been changed for this demonstration. In this slide, a database reference to a secure case file has been used as a pseudonymized reference. So, always provided that the data source itself is secure, this page in itself would be compliant and acceptable for validation. However, it is one of 3 pages, with the 3rd page also not being compliant, as we shall see. This 3rd page of the document is the least compliant. Not only does it name the patient and reveal his address, but it gives the names and times of domiciliary care worker visits. This kind of breach is potentially quite serious, as in the wrong hands it could lead to a risk of harm, as an individual armed with this detail could potentially pass off as a relief care worker and obtain the patient's trust and confidence. Sometimes, particularly sensitive details may need to be transmitted through secure channels. Each CCG has a controlled environment for finance for this purpose, which would be another way of avoiding PCD being placed on the system. Users with ISFE system access who are responsible for validating invoices for patient care must fully and consistently review all of each invoice image and its supporting detail, and where they come across PCD, take action using this standard ISFE process to ask SBS to reject or redact the image and to follow up with the provider concerned in line with information governance advice and support. Within the ISFE system Invoice Workbench, there is a specific process designed to deal with any invoice image containing or accompanied by PCD. The user, having identified the problem, checks the box for Unable to Process and then selects one of three options depending on whether the invoice itself needs to be returned unpaid for correction to the supplier and resubmission, or it is simply a case of SBS removing an offending attachment or electronic paperclip. In any case, the provider should be contacted, informed of the nature of the breach, and given specific guidance for action to be taken, being asked not to repeat the PCD breach. There are template letters available on the website for sending to suppliers to support this process. This page contains a screenshot of the Invoice Workbench in ISFE, highlighting the three options for rejection, removal, or redaction of offending data. In addition to contacting suppliers, finance teams using ISFE should be aware of the supplier rules and vacation rules that can be set within the system so that invoices are directed in workflow to the correct individuals for validation and approval. This is a summary of the key topics that have been covered in this presentation, with which you should now be familiar and take care to apply.